for me, there's this um, kind of romantic idea of the writer as a singular person, one human being wrestling with the blank page to create something entirely original and new and illustrative of the human condition for all those around them. And it's kind of like the auteur idea of movie making, and it's kind of bullshit. Um, none of the artists or writers or filmmakers, I think, who do um, the best work, even the folks who have a voice that is very peculiar and very very identifiable as their own, are doing this in a vacuum. Um, we have, even if we don't have collaborators per se, we have editors, we have copy editors, we have publicists, we have friends we talk to, we have critique groups, we have beta readers, we have uh, authors whose work we have read and who we've incorporated that into ourselves. The idea of any of this existing in a vacuum is sort of a fantasy.
What is up, everybody? You're listening to episode 118 of SFF Addicts. I'm your host, Adrian M. Gibson, and welcome to your weekly dive into the world of science fiction, fantasy, and writing craft. Joining me, as always, my co-host, the Chewie to my Han Solo, the Joker to my Commander Shepard, MJ Kuhn. How's it going, MJ?
Hi there. I am doing lovely. How are you, Adrian?
Hi there. I'm good. And if you want to support MJ, this lovely human being, you can go pick up her debut novel, Among Thieves, The Blue Baby, and the sequel, Thick Ass Thieves, The Green Baby. If you want more heists than you ever thought you could handle, and you read these books and you realize, I can't get enough heists. That's just how good they are. So heists, man. Up the fucking wazoo.
There's no limit.
There's no limit to heists.
Yeah. And if you want to support the lovely Adrian, you can check out his debut novel, Mushroom Blues, for fungal punk police procedural goodness. So don't miss it.
As well, a quick note for everyone out there listening or watching, the official SFF Addicts Patreon and merch store are live, so check the links in the description to support what we do here. Also, don't forget to rate and review the podcast on your favorite podcast app, and subscribe to the FanFiAddict YouTube channel, where this and every other episode of the show is available in full video. And now joining us once again is the writing duo James S.A. Corey, Daniel Abraham, and Ty Franck. Welcome back to the show, you two. How you doing?
Since we're recording this all at once, we're doing very much as we did last time.
It's like an hour later. I'm doing fine.
We've seen you guys.
I'm doing good. A heads up, this is part 2 of our 2-part chat with Daniel and Ty, so I recommend checking out part 1 to get to know them better. Today, though, we're making like an after-school special and learning the joys of teamwork, talking about writing as collaboration. Before we dig deeper into the episode, a quick word from our sponsor.
Bren Caius is a living legend, the greatest warrior of her age. But much of her legacy is a lie, fabricated by those in desperate need of a champion. As High General of Aemon, Bren has grown weary of commanding a dwindling army against the Gnoll warlord Kret Bonebreaker and his fearsome legion. Amidst the bloodshed, she must lead her soldiers to victory while contending with a disloyal advisor, a mysterious prophet, the cruel ambitions of nobles, and ghosts from her past. The fate of Aemon rests upon a single epic battle, one of fire, steel, and magic. Can Bren stand against the darkness and become the hero she's expected to be? War of the Hounds is a gripping tale set in the world of the Dryad's crown and based on Shakespeare's Henry V. It's the story of Bren's greatest triumph and her most heartbreaking failure. War of the Hounds is available for free. Visit thatdavidhopkins.com and sign up for the Epic Fantasy newsletter to receive a free download of this ebook.
And now, enjoy the rest of this episode of SFF Addicts. So to start off, for each of you, what is the importance of collaboration in the writing process?
Well, I can take a swing at this one.
Go ahead.
If you want. I think for me, there's this kind of romantic idea of the writer as a singular person, one human being wrestling with the blank page to create something entirely original and new and illustrative of the human condition for all those around them. And it's kind of like the auteur idea of movie making, and it's kind of bullshit. None of the artists or writers or filmmakers, I think, who do the best work, even the folks who have a voice that is very peculiar and very, very identifiable as their own, are doing this in a vacuum. We have, even if we don't have collaborators per se, we have editors, we have copy editors, we have publicists, we have friends we talk to, we have critique groups, we have beta readers, we have authors whose work we have read and who we've incorporated that into ourselves. The idea of any of this existing in a vacuum is sort of a fantasy. So it's for me, it's more of a question of what part of that soup of human connection and artistic history and influence do you want to focus on when you're thinking about what your collaboration is, what the nature of that collaboration looks like.
Yeah.
Ty?
I mean, for me, without collaboration, I would have 12 fewer books.
13. I think 13.
13 fewer books.
Are we at 13 fewer books?
We're lucky. We're lucky 13 at this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's pretty important, for literally anything to happen.
That's the key. Just find yourself a Daniel and you get 13 books.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like that you've mentioned, because we did want to ask about, obviously we're going to talk a lot about you guys working together in your partnership. But we did want to talk a little bit about all the other ways in which writers collaborate to create their work, right? Even if you never plan to co-write a novel, you will work with editors. You'll work with critique partners and your beta readers. And, hey, maybe listeners out there, you'll even get to work with a TV writer's room as well. Best case scenario.
It's
right?
very unlikely, but yes, it can happen.
Yeah.
People can dream, Ty.
Oh, I'm not telling them that they won't get a TV show. I'm just saying that the getting a TV show and actually getting to work with the writer's room, that's like winning the lottery and your prize is you got another lottery ticket.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's something I definitely really wanted to talk about a little bit, which, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit. But since we're kind of on the topic of the TV show.
Like, how did that happen? What the hell?
How did that happen? Right? Because it is very rare. We hear all the time, right? About like,
no, it never happened.
The show went off the rails, and it's like, well, the author wasn't even involved. So of course it did. Right. How did it happen where you guys were able to be so involved?
It's a terrible idea having the writer in the room. It's just a bad plan.
Right? The person that created the thing that was popular in the first place. Who needs them?
No, seriously. In order to have that function, you have to have somebody who has spent sometimes years creating an artistic vision and internalizing artistic vision and then have them go in and then divest completely of their ego and have it be kind of the starting point for a bunch of other people to do something else. There's not a lot. It's not an easy space to be in. There's a lot of people who are not constitutionally suited to it.
Yeah, most prose writers are very, very, very bad at adapting their own work, because the adaptation process is a process of reimagining. Because the things that work on the page don't work on the screen 100% of the time, and you generally have less space to tell the story in, so you're going to be cutting things, and because you're cutting things, you're going to have to find other solves other than the ones that the novel used to tell the same story, because maybe big chunks of things that were important in the novel to tell the story are now gone. So how do we still tell that same story? So you're going to have to imagine new things. And like Daniel said, if somebody spent many, many years making the choices that they made to tell the story that they told, going in and saying, all of your choices are now wrong because we're doing a different thing and we have to make completely new choices. Most novelists are not good at hearing that. And that's not a bash on novelists. It's just a reality of the process.
And I'm just going to take a moment to plant my flag here. Being a prose stylist, being somebody who has understood storytelling deeply in novel and short story form is in some ways the worst possible training to be a screenwriter. The things that are wonderful and evocative in prose fail in the script. It was a tremendous struggle for me to like understand all of the stuff that I wanted to put in, because it's really evocative and it's really clear what I mean, and then you can put it in there and why that has no place in the screenplay version. So if you're coming in there and you're not thinking, I am an apprentice now and I know nothing and I'm going to be as useful as I can to this process, but I am not in any way the most important person in this room, it's just, I can't imagine why you'd want to do it.
Yeah,
that's great advice, though, right? I mean, for anyone that does end up in that situation, right? Or if they're dreaming of ending up in that situation, to know that it will require that mental shift.
If
right?
you, just some advice for people listening, if you want to be a screenwriter, write a script. And it is possible to be both a novelist and a screenwriter. There's a bunch of people who have done both things and done it very well. So I'm not saying it's one or the other. But don't think I want to be a screenwriter, therefore I'm going to wait until somebody adapts my novel and then I'll learn screenwriting. That's the wrong way to do it. So if you want to be a screenwriter, just write a script. Just come up with an original idea, write a script, a pilot or a movie or whatever, send it out. Learn screenwriting that way on its own. Then you can still write your novels. And then if at some point you get lucky in the future and they want to adapt your novel into a screenplay, you can say, I have X number of screenplays that I've already written. You're going to have a much better argument for why you should be part of the process. Screenwriting and novel writing are two completely different skill sets. The fact that they both involve typing doesn't mean that they're the same thing. And if you want to develop your skill set in one or the other or both, you need to do that individually.
Yeah.
Yep.
And probably television is like probably the best way to test the waters for that, because obviously the scripts are shorter.
You're boned regardless. I mean, seriously, it's the market is terrible. You should do it for the love of the form to start with. And yeah, it's breaking into television or breaking into feature writing or any of those. It's a brutal process, and one that Ty and I largely skipped by just being lucky instead.
Yeah.
But our friends who are like more traditional paths, it looks terrible. Looks hard.
Even worse than publishing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I was gonna say, I feel like it is
worse.
It's more expensive to produce a show or a movie than it is to produce a book, right? So there's fewer spots at the table, maybe.
Hollywood is not a huge place. There are not that many slots. I mean, how many books are getting published next month? Hundreds? Right. Thousands?
Thousands, probably.
Yeah.
Thousands of TV shows are not getting made next month.
Yeah.
Thousands of movies are not getting made next month.
Well, and as you said, there's a higher barrier to entry cost-wise.
Yeah.
Making a TV show is very expensive. Making a movie is very expensive. And there's actually, I think, per job available, more competition. So for every one writer's room job that's available, there are so many people trying to get that job. If I want to publish a book, I don't have to be better than Stephen King. There's room for Stephen King and other people. In a writer's room, it's much more competitive. You kind of have to be better than all the other people that are trying for that slot. And that makes it a much more difficult job to get.
And that competitiveness is probably applicable across all the different niches within that industry.
Yeah.
It's like people who are like working like doing camera work, people who are doing costuming and, you know, like all the different facets of that whole process.
The one thing that the film industry does do very well, and actually alleviates that a little bit, but you got to start young, is they have fantastic apprenticeship programs. So if you want to be a TV writer, you don't start out as a TV writer if you're a young person. You start out as like an assistant. And then maybe you can be an assistant in a writer's room. So you're not writing, you're not pitching story, you're getting everybody lunch, but you're in there. You're hearing them talk, you're hearing the thing. And then at some point, maybe they say, hey, do you want to try a shot at being a writer's assistant? Now you're actually taking notes. And you're sort of part of the writing process in that way. And then if the showrunner likes you and thinks you've done a good job, they go, hey, I'm going to give you a shot at writing one outline this year, or maybe one early draft of a script this year. So you can sort of apprentice your way into it rather than just battling everybody for the writing slots. And Hollywood does that across the board. So you mentioned camera people. Everybody starts out as a camera assistant. You're the person who runs around getting the little SIM cards that go in the cameras and that kind of stuff. You're not actually taking any shots yourself, but you eventually work your way up to that. And so if you're young and interested in screenwriting, there are paths into it that are not just like the Gladiator Dome where you're battling every other writer for the slot. There are paths into it where you can do a less scary job to familiarize yourself with the business and work your way up.
And
that's a much more old school approach too.
Well, and it has a lot to recommend it. I mean, there's a lot that you learn just by being in the room.
Yeah.
Ty and I learned that by getting into the room another way, but the process was the same. I mean, the process, we went in there knowing a whole lot less than we knew coming back out.
Yeah. And how about the two of you together with your collaboratives, like co-writing process? How did you because we talked about it a little bit last episode, how it started, but how did you kind of figure out the collaborative process that works best for you, like dividing responsibilities, how that division of labor is like evolved over time, handling creative disagreements, if you've had any, that kind of thing?
I mean, everything's a negotiation, right?
Yeah, we talk a lot. Yeah, we talk a lot, and similar to the writer's room, neither of us is coming in being the guy who is, buck stops here. My idea is the right one. If we have a disagreement, we're going to do it my way. That would be unpleasant. The buck doesn't even really slow down. It just keeps going around until we've come to some agreement or understanding, or one of us says, yeah, I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me, let's try it.
Like that experimental attitude kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and anytime you're going into something where it's a collaboration, part of what you're agreeing to is that it's not going to be exactly what it would be if you were doing it by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think because it's an artistic endeavor, people think it's a separate thing. But I mean, every human has had a relationship with another human. And unless you're an asshole, those relationships are always a negotiation. Like, I want to go here for lunch. Well, I don't want to go there. I don't like that food. I want to go here for lunch. Okay, now let's have a conversation about where we can go that will please both of us or do the least harm to whoever, right? That's just life. That's how people go through. If you're married, if you have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, whatever it is, that's how you get through life. The fact that you're doing a creative work together doesn't change that. If you're a decent human being, you start with, I would like to do this. The other person goes, well, we could do that, but I would like to do this other thing. And now the conversation begins. Which of those is better? Which of those pleases the most people and does the least harm? Yeah.
Well, and what is the project we're working on? One of the things that happened with the Expanse and is happening now with Captives War is we spent a lot of time at the front talking about what the project was and what the vision of the project was, and agreeing on what the goals were, so that when there's a question of, well, do you want to structure the chapter this way or that way? Do you want to have this character carry the ball for this part of the plot or give it to this other character? We have a shared context specific to the project that kind of acts as a North Star.
Yeah, agreeing on what you're trying to accomplish is the beginning of figuring all this stuff out. I mean, if I say I want to go to lunch and you say I want to go to a movie, there is no lunch place that will satisfy your desire for a movie, and no movie that will make me feel like I've eaten lunch. So if we're that widely divergent on what we're trying to accomplish next, that's a problem. So if you're going to work with somebody, you have to agree we're both getting lunch, right? That's what we're trying to do here. And then if they say yes, now you have a shared context. You can start negotiation.
But if you're writing a buddy cop comedy kind of slapstick thing, and they're writing a searing examination of the criminal justice system, it's not going to work.
And we have an example as somebody we work with who's made a lot of TV shows. He said the worst TV show he was ever involved with was one where he came in after it had already started, and the top people had different ideas of what the show was. So yeah, the showrunner thought they were making one kind of show. The top EP in the writer's room wanted to make a different kind of show, and the studio thought they were making a completely different show from either of those things. And so it was just a horrible working environment because nobody agreed on what they were making. Yeah, so you have to start out, I mean, if Daniel wants to write epic fantasy and I want to write hard sci-fi, there is no book that we're going to write that's going to satisfy both those needs.
Yep.
Exactly. It's what I've learned having kids, like with my almost 4-year-old, it's like everything's a negotiation. And I'm like trying to get into this groove of like, that thing you want, yes. But, and here's the big fucking caveat that comes after but. So I can try to use psychology, like sort of like psychosomatics and psychology to sort of try and navigate it a little better. It doesn't always work out that great.
Oh, dude.
I'm sure you know with your kids.
It's not a perfect system.
It's not a perfect system, but it's better than like beating your head against a wall or like these differing opinions not really finding any common
But 4-year-olds are really small. You can totally beat them in a fight. Why are you negotiating?
You're like, I don't know if you know this.
Where's the HR department?
one of us has kids. It's not time.
It's not time. Oh my god.
Oh my god.
But on the same, not on the kid beating point, but like the Ty, what you mentioned about like maybe you want to write hard sci-fi, maybe Daniel wants to write epic fantasy. There is that avenue where Daniel, like you've been able to continue on with your solo writing stuff.
Oh, sure.
While also collaborating. And so it's like both of you are able to do the collaborations together, but also take ideas that might not work together and follow them individually. So how has it been for each of you to kind of have that solo versus collaborative writing path? And maybe how, like you mentioned it last episode, Daniel, how your writing style actually differs from the Expanse, say, to like the Kithamar books.
Well, both of us have had projects that we did solo. I think I'm the one who's done the most like prose writing solo. Ty has done like other creative stuff. Because this is my kink more than I think it's his.
That prose kink.
Yeah, no, seriously. But it's fun to be in a band. It's fun to jam. It's fun to get together and kind of pass the focus back and forth and have that energy moving around. And it's also fun to have everything be exactly the way you want it to be. When I'm doing the solo stuff, it is exactly what I choose every time. And that's kind of nice. I don't know that it's always as good as the stuff that's got more feedback or more other people's voices in it too. But both versions are fun. It's one you get the advantage of having somebody else's mind to bounce against, and so it winds up being kind of fresher, winds up being more dynamic and more alive. And the other one, you never have to compromise anything. It's exactly your vision, which means after about 4 books, it is pretty much just a record of your personal cliches and kinks, just laid out in prose form. So
if anyone wants to get to know Daniel, just go read
no, seriously. Well, and we say that you can't judge a writer by their work. There's a difference between the artist and the art, right? But you get an artist who is always talking about the same issue over and over and over. You know something about them.
Yeah,
very true.
If you read a bunch of my stuff, you'll know something about me.
Those themes.
Not everything.
The themes that pop up, though. I feel like a lot of writers we've talked to have been like, okay, I noticed that I re-examined this theme, and without even meaning to, right? Mm-hmm. Across several disparate works.
Ty, what about you? Like the kind of your experiences on the solo front, on the collaborative front?
If somebody's not waiting for me to get some work done, I don't do shit.
You need Daniel for the accountability.
I do, yeah. And when I'm writing or producing television, there are people who are waiting for me to get things done. So I get things done. But if I'm sitting at home, it is so much easier to turn on my PlayStation than it is to sit down and start writing a book. So the PlayStation's always going to win.
Very fair. Oh, well, kind of shifting gears to talk a little bit more on the publishing side of things. Because we talked a little bit, or Daniel, you mentioned, the need to collaborate with editors and things like that. Can you talk about the collaboration process with your editors? And, especially if you've ever had to make some significant changes to work, due to editorial feedback, and like how you have navigated that.
You see, when we started our collaboration, it was like 2010, 2011. And the publishing industry at that point had already started this shift into laying more and more and more workload on editors. I feel like a lot of people went into publishing because they want to be able to work with pros. They want to be able to make the pros really sing and really shine. And what they wind up doing is going to marketing meetings. And that's, we have had meaningful feedback from our present editor. Did some really good work on the Mercy of Gods, one that's just coming out, and we had a guy who was in The Expanse who did some I think really insightful commentary that I think improved the series. But there's also been some editors who were just too swamped to do it. In that case, that's you kind of have to start seeking out that feedback from someplace else. You can't rely upon the publishing industry to have the spare cycles for you.
You also have to be aware of the context. I mean, if you're a first-time writer and the publisher is taking a gamble on you, you're more likely to get, I think, the publisher wanting to make sure that the thing that you're making is the thing that they want, right? The problem for Daniel and I, and we've actually had to address this with our publisher, the first book was such a hit, and the editor for the first book left to go do something else shortly after the first book came out, so we got a new editor. that we were concerned that the new editor was scared to give us notes because we were already a big hit. And so if we threw a fit, if we got a note and threw a fit, that person's a brand new editor. We're a known quantity. We're going to win that fight with the publisher. So what we had to do was actually talk to the actual publisher, the head of our imprint, and say, we are actually looking for notes. We're not going to get mad. Please, if we're doing something wrong, please tell us. Because we were worried that the lack of notes was because of this power dynamic. And if you're Stephen King, you reach a certain point. Nobody edits Stephen King. He gets to do whatever the fuck he wants. And if you're an editor, you better be very clear that Stephen King wants your notes. That's part of the relation. How you have to navigate that relationship too is being aware of the power differential between you and the editor. If you're a baby writer, it's very different than if you are already a best-selling known quantity. And that's part of how you have to approach that and be aware of the fears that the publisher will have about you too, and how to assuage their fears.
And there's Ty and I were both in a critique group. One of the ways that you do that, you get feedback from your colleagues and contemporaries, some of whom are considerably more successful than you. And being able to go in and say, here are the notes that I'm getting from this best-selling author, and he's wrong, and I'm going to ignore that note because it's a bad. I see what he's saying, but it's a bad note, and I'm not going to do it. There's power differentials in there too that can be tricky to negotiate.
Yeah.
Right, because it all plays into like how you, as the author, as like the the driving force behind this story, how you feel about the notes that you receive. It's kind of like balancing keeping the work yours versus incorporating the feedback from the publishing team or from beta readers, critique partners, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And all of those dynamics change dramatically when you go into screenwriting. So in the writer's room, there is a showrunner, and that person has the final say. There's no arguing with that. They just get the final say. So even if you've written a screenplay and the showrunner for the show, and the showrunner goes, well, I don't like what you did here, I'm going to change it. That just happens. You don't get to argue your point. Good showrunners do want your feedback, and they do want to talk through this stuff. But ultimately, the final say is theirs, irrespective of what you think. And understanding that dynamic and understanding how it's different, and how just because I wrote the first draft of the screenplay doesn't mean I get the final say on what it looks like, helps enormously. And I think, and we were talking last time about adapting your own work. That's one of the things that a lot of people miss when they try to be part of the team adapting their work, is they feel like, well, I wrote the book, so I should have the final say. No, you don't. There's a showrunner in the room, and they get the final.
Right.
You signed a contract.
Yeah.
And they gave you a check.
Yeah.
And now the showrunner gets the final say.
And the dynamics in a writer's room are very interesting too, because it is a very hierarchical thing. You got the showrunner at the top. You've got the senior producing writers, the next level down. You've got sort of the producer or story editor level writers, and then you got the baby writers. And if you're a baby writer in a writer's room, you should be very careful about how assertively you present your points to the senior people in that room. So there's also a big part of it is understanding the power dynamics in any setting. So in publishing, am I a baby writer? Am I already a huge bestseller? How does that affect how my editor sees me? How does that affect whether or not they're going to be willing to give me a note? Or in a writer's room, I'm the baby writer in the room. I don't think that senior producing writer has a good point. I think the argument they just made is bad. Is this the right time to say that? Will I be heard, or will I just be bounced out on my ear?
And even within collaborations, I mean, Ty and I have a very equal, egalitarian relationship in the work that we do. That's not always the case. There was a book that I wrote with little Daniel, who was just starting off his career, Gardner Dozois, who had been the editor of Asimov's science fiction for ever, and George George R. Martin. So of the three, I'm going to have the smallest voice, and that's just going to be the way that is. And how you negotiate that is it's chimpanzee politics. That's just a bunch of primates dealing with each other. So,
and I mean, ultimately, if it's uncomfortable, if it's toxic, if it's not working, all of us have the right to walk away. But in many circumstances, that's the only right you have left is, this is too toxic, I'm leaving. You can always do that. And if you can't, you should call the FBI. But understanding that at a certain point, the only option you have left is to leave.
Yeah, because I imagine in a two-person collaboration, like co-writing a book, it's much easier, it's much quicker for you to identify whether things are working or not. And leaving is a much easier process. But
it'd be hard at this point.
For you two, yeah.
We're committed now.
Yeah, well, you two, yeah. But it's like if you just start out collaborating with someone, you're in the process of co-writing your first novel or co-writing a project. Like I think throughout the writing of that first book, I would imagine it's clear how the dynamic is working, and if you would consider continuing after that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas in a screenwriter's room, it's like, well, fuck, if I'm the baby writer and I'm trying to move up the ladder, what's the dynamic here?
Or if I want to eat or pay rent.
Right.
I mean,
exactly, that too.
There's a lot of factors that go into collaboration. Not all of them are artistic.
And the role of humility. I mean, one of the things I learned in my first experience in writers' rooms is understanding that my instinctive reaction to what was said, whether or not I agreed with it, the further I got, the more skills I developed, the more I realized my initial instinctive reactions were wrong. And, the having the humility to like, I don't understand this. I don't know why they're saying that. I don't think they're right. I'm just going to keep my mouth shut until I understand what's happening, instead of just blabbering out with my first reaction to everything. That humility is super helpful. And Daniel will sometimes say, I think we should do this, and I won't understand it. I'll just say, I don't get why we would do that. And you go, well, let's try it. Let's try it and see. And having the humility to go, all right, let's try that. Let's see if that works. If you can't do that, you're going to have a really hard time collaborating.
100%. And Daniel, you mentioned the collaboration you did early on in your career, like Baby Daniel. Looking at that experience, did you collaborate any other times before you and Ty started James S.A. Corey? And Ty, I want to get your take on it as well, on like collaborations that you've done outside of this.
I wrote a couple of short stories with people. And the novel, well, I did a couple of short stories with people. I was involved in some shared world stuff. I did some stuff in the Wild Cards universe, and we also, Ty and I also wrote the last expanded universe Star Wars novel, but right before Disney
Really?
shifted that all over to Legends and took it out of the canon. We were the guys who closed the door and shut off the lights on the expanded universe.
Which one is that? What is it called?
Honor Among Thieves.
Honor Among Thieves.
It's a Han Solo book.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I had no idea you guys wrote that.
Yep. No, it was originally it was a trilogy. The first one in the trilogy was Martha Wells. Yep. Of Murderbot fame, then us, and then Kevin Hearn was doing the third one, and Kevin's is the first Star Wars novel in the new canon, and ours was the last one that didn't make it off the Titanic.
Wait, so they cut off in the same trilogy with book 2 entering into.
Well, it stopped being a trilogy at that point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
true.
Yeah.
And they
Sure.
were
Then
standalone
Kevin's
books.
like, well, fuck. Now he's got to write a standalone. So.
No, they were all standalone books. It was easy
Right.
to do. It was an easy cut. But
Ty, what about you? Any collaborations that you've done other than the Star Wars one that Daniel mentioned?
Other than
James S.A. Corey.
the 20 or so screenplays I've done. I mean, no, I haven't really written with. I think very early on, my friend Emily and I wrote a story together. But that's the only one that I really collaborated before Daniel. But I mean, we were talking in the last thing about everybody has 10,000 pages of crap in them, and you have to get that out. My 10,000 pages of crap I was everybody's favorite DM for 15 years. So,
which is a profound amount of collaborative storytelling.
That's what I was going to say. It's a ton of collaborative storytelling. So, anybody who's been a DM before, you come up with your amazing world building and your amazing plot and all the plot hooks and all the things, and your characters go through the world ignoring all of the plot hooks.
And, just ruin everything you planned.
And chasing after the thing you thought they would never do. And you got to be able to pivot and tell a compelling story with everybody running around trying to ruin everything.
There's this one dwarf cleric. He was just sitting there. We all thought, hey, he looks sketchy. We walked the other way.
That guy's up to no good. But I think and that is, that's where you learn information control, and you learn how to pivot your story when unexpected things happen, and listening to what other people say and trying to see the interesting thing in what they just said rather than insisting on your thing. I mean, I think that's where I learned a lot of that early on.
Yeah.
I imagine there are a lot of totalitarian DMs out there.
Yeah, and they're the worst, and nobody likes playing with
I'd say they wouldn't be very fun to play with, though.
Yeah. I have played in those games, but not for the whole campaign.
Right? Yeah. Like, oh no, I have a scheduling conflict. I can't make it this week. Oh
no, I hate this. I quit.
Yeah.
I mean,
you're a bit more direct than I am.
I'm just saying.
Slam the rule book down. I'm done with this shit.
Well, I want to touch on critique partners and beta readers a little bit, because I feel like we've kind of flirted with talking about it, but we haven't actually dug into that. Especially kind of tied with the fact that a lot of editors are really overloaded, or, and because even I'm a baby writer, and on my projects, I didn't get like a ton of structural edits. And I think it's largely, hopefully it was just super clean when it got there, but I also do think it's one of those things where a lot of editors don't necessarily have the capacity to dig in deep on every writer's project these days.
Also, a lot of editors who are becoming authors at the same time.
Yeah, well, and just the critique process and the beta reading process is just more and more critical, I think, for everyone across the indie pub to trad pub spectrum there. So what role does critique and beta reading play in your process, like even at this point, right, when you guys have made it as far as you have? And how does this collaboration and feedback outside of the partnership, right, on those projects play into your creative process?
I mean, we have one beta reader.
We've had her from the beginning.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty much it.
You don't let him go.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do crit groups. We did. Daniel had quit. I was still in the crit group for like the first third of Leviathan Wakes when we were still working on that. So like, I think the first third of that book went through a critique group. But I stopped going shortly after Daniel stopped going. And we've never had a crit group since then. But a good beta reader is invaluable. And especially for Daniel and I, our beta reader is a woman. And we want a woman's notes on our books going, oh, by the way, this thing that you have this female character say, no woman would ever say that. That's a good note.
Yeah,
that's why I was really appreciative of MJ being my beta.
Yeah,
really important. and there was a tradition of for a while of sensitivity readers too, people who were taking. Here I am. I'm going to write about, say, the Filipino American experience. without actually having it. I should maybe outsource some of that and get somebody to check my work here. I think that's a good impulse.
Yeah. 100%. Well, and your beta reader is clearly, I love the variety and authenticity of the female characters in The Expanse. It's one of the things that I mean,
after book one,
appreciated
I think like the amount of female POVs goes up exponentially.
Yes, well, and not even just POVs, but the number of female characters that fill such a variety of roles where they're strong and they're varied, right? It's not you got your Bobby, which I love, who's like a badass, but then you have you have your Avasarala, you have your characters that are still strong in very different ways. So yeah, that's something I, as a female reader, very much appreciated about those books. So
glad it worked.
You're able to bring in.
We tried. I mean, even in the first book, we tried to have women uncommentedly in positions of power, just as a world building thing. But I think it needed to have some POV characters for it to really become noticeable.
Yeah. And I mean, especially as the series goes on, where you have so many different characters in each book. I think like by the time Leviathan falls, there's probably
I don't know, like there's a lot,
like at least 10 POV characters across the whole book. But yeah, it works to have that varied experience. And I think beta readers can help with that. If critique groups work for you, that can help with that as well.
The other thing, though, talking about collaboration, the other thing we don't talk about very often in this process is plot breaking. We did this with a friend of ours like last weekend, where we have a friend, he's working on a book. He's having some kind of conceptual issues he wants to work through, and me and Ty and him and another local writer, we just all got together in the afternoon and talked about ideas and talked about kind of what the structures are in the story and what the expectations are and what he has set up and what we see that he hasn't seen, and that can be really fruitful too. And it's not necessarily that you only get feedback once you have a piece of prose. You can get feedback when you're doing the conceptual work at the front too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's like it depends on who it is, but if you have someone that you can trust, it's like you can riff the ideas,
and
you can kind of like work through an outline with them. There are so many different steps where you can bring in another person.
When you get a critique group that has like one douchebag in it, it just poisons the water.
It sours it so fast.
God.
Well, because you have to have an environment where you feel comfortable expressing and receiving feedback. And yeah, if you have...
Well, I would say the number one skill you can develop, and this is across all creative endeavors, is treating all requested feedback. This is when you request feedback, because people will come up and start giving you their opinions that you have no idea why they're talking to you. But if you request feedback, treating all requested feedback with respect, and then knowing which things you're going to listen to, which things you're going to throw away. Because just because you request feedback and are given feedback doesn't mean you have to do what that person said. So having enough of your own mind about what the project you're trying to do is, what that should look like, and being able to weed through the feedback and go, oh, this actually helps the thing I'm trying to do. The rest of those things are useless to me. And that doesn't mean that you treat it with disrespect. You asked for the feedback, they gave it. You have to respect that process, but it doesn't mean you have to do what they said. And having the confidence in your vision that allows you to pick out the ones that are helpful and throw away the ones that aren't is an important part of that process.
Yeah, I think that like across the board for whatever creative endeavor you're doing is so useful, because like even when I was tattooing, and learning, because tattooing is like there's so much mechanics, there's so much biology involved in that, and it's like you have to work through the fucking weeds of all these different systems that are kind of like combining into this artistic expression, and you just have to really pay attention to like watching what other people are doing, watching how they tinker with their machine, watching how they apply the needle to the skin, all these different things. And whenever anyone gives you feedback, it's so valuable. But like Ty said, you don't have to take everything with such a monumental weight of importance. You don't have to apply every single thing to your practice. You can take all of this feedback, really respect it, and figure out what works best for you. Just like writing advice, figure out what works best for you and tinker with it until you find the right way.
And there's a lot of times when people will give you bad advice. There's a lot of times when one of the things that we've talked about, me and Ty, is that a lot of times, almost always when people tell you that there's a problem. Almost always when they tell you how to fix it, they're wrong.
Yes. Yeah. Well, because they could point out a scene that's not working, and you'll be like, "Oh, I know this scene needs to happen." This or whatever.
Right, but there's like a level of specificity.
Right. Well, or they're pointing at something that happened 5 scenes ago that you didn't set up properly. And as the writer, you need to be able to read through all of the feedback and identify the underlying comment underneath the comment, right?
That's the screenwriting thing. There's nothing that tells you have an Act 1 problem like an Act 3 problem. So people are like, oh, your Act 3 is weak. Well, okay, what did I screw up in Act 1 that's making Act 3 look weak? Yeah.
Go back to the beginning.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that is a wonderful note to end on. I think the two of you have offered up a ton of really amazing advice, a lot of amazing experiences about collaboration on all different fronts. And I really appreciate you taking the time to collaborate with MJ and I on this mini masterclass.
I have to say that I would be terrified to do tattoos. Because
right, I would too.
If it's permanent, and if you screw it up, isn't the feedback they drag you outside and give you a pavement facial?
Right.
I mean, I never tattooed in like fucking Hell's Angels crowds or anything like that. Majority of my clients were like
peace-loving individuals,
men and women. Yeah, a lot of peace-loving individuals. And a lot of the times that I screwed up, it was like, you talked about 10,000 hours or 10,000 pages of writing. Yeah. I did like 50 tattoos on myself. So
right.
So you're like you are your juvenilia. That's
exactly.
It's a
brave man.
A bold choice.
That's why I wasn't scared to go into writing.
There's no way to do a trunk tattoo.
No, I can't trunk my tattoos.
Yeah, right.
You just tattoo in less visible areas at first, maybe.
Yeah. It's most of my legs just because of like reach and everything like that. But yeah, thank you both so much, Ty, Daniel, for doing this with MJ and I.
Good talking.
And for suggesting this topic as well.
Yeah.
All right. So folks can find you online at jamessacorey.com, your official website. Go check out the James S.A. Corey Patreon, where Ty and Daniel are writing a novel.
James S.A. Corey writes, right? Was the title?
Writes a novel.
James S.A. Corey writes a novel. Understand that one is going to go until we finish the novel, and then that Patreon is going away. That's a temporary.
It's a one-shot thing. Yep.
It's a one-shot.
We'll get in there now.
Yeah, right. No time to waste.
Go check out The Expanse. Go check out Mercy of Gods, which is out now. Go watch the TV show, because all those actors and everyone who worked on it are amazing. Screenwriters across the board. Fantastic TV show. But yeah, thank you guys again. Real pleasure to dig into collaboration with you.
Yeah.
You can also follow SFF Addicts on Instagram, Twitter, Threads, all that jazz at SFF Addicts Pod. You can follow me at Adrian M. Gibson. You can go check out Mushroom Blues if you want a little fungal noir up in your imagination. MJ, what about you?
Yeah, you can find me on all the main socials, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever, at MJ Kuhn Books. Or just find all my links at mjkuhn.com, and you can get my books there as well. So.
And Thorin was on MJ's lap earlier. You can see that he's a little skinny. Go support him. He wants to. All right. Well, thank you everyone for listening. For now, keep reading, keep imagining, and we'll see you next time on SFF Addicts.